They locked her in a cage for being poor. Not a physical cage of iron bars, but a far crueler one built from debt, judgment, and the crushing weight of small-town gossip. Her name was Elara, and she knew the biting sting of hunger, the chill of a threadbare coat in winter, and the silent, turning backs of those who once called her friend. Every single day was a battle for survival, a constant struggle against a world that seemed determined to keep her down. What if I told you that in just a few minutes you'll witness a transformation so profound, it will redefine everything you thought possible about compassion and second chances? Everyone in Havenwood Valley whispered about Elara, painting her as a lost cause, a burden. They saw only her poverty, never the fierce spirit that burned within her, the quiet determination to rise above her circumstances. She was trapped, watching her dreams wither like unwatered roses. Then a dusty, weathered pickup truck rumbled into town, carrying a man named Jedediah Stone. A widowed rancher, a father of 5, a man whose own life had been ravaged by loss. He was a pillar of the community, a man of quiet strength, but even he carried burdens no one truly understood. Jedediah saw Elara not as a problem to be solved, but as a soul in need, a reflection of his own past struggles. He extended a hand, offering her work, a place to stay, a sliver of hope. Yet his own sister, Martha, a woman hardened by years of unspoken resentments, saw Elara as nothing more than a dangerous distraction, a threat to their family's fragile peace. Martha confronted Jedediah, her voice sharp as a winter wind, demanding he send Elara away. "You're bringing ruin upon us all," she spat, her eyes blazing. This was no fairy tale, no easy road to redemption. The town, Martha, and Elara's own deep-seated fears stood as formidable barriers. But Jedediah had a secret, a quiet strength that defied expectation, and he was about to do something no one, not even Elara, could have ever predicted. What happened next changed everything, shattering the cage and forging an unbreakable bond. The biting wind of the Wyoming high desert offered little comfort, whipping dust into the eyes of Clara May. Every gust seemed to carry the echo of her father's last words, a promise of a better life that had shattered with his sudden passing. Now the small, weathered cabin she'd called home for 2 decades stood empty, its windows like vacant eyes staring out at the unforgiving landscape. Just yesterday, a curt notice from the county sheriff had been tacked to the door: pay the overdue taxes or forfeit the land. The sum felt astronomical, an insurmountable mountain for a woman with nothing but calloused hands and a fading hope. Clara May traced the rough-hewn timber of the porch, the splinters of familiar ache in her fingertips. Her father had built this place with his own sweat, dreaming of a prosperous ranch, a legacy for his only daughter. Instead, only BT remained, a heavy shroud smothering her future. She had tried everything, selling off the last few scrawny cattle, bartering her meager garden produce in town, even mending torn shirts for the saloon girls. Each effort, however, was a drop in a vast, empty bucket. A shadow fell across the porch. Sheriff Brody, his face a mask of official duty, stood at the foot of the steps, his presence a stark reminder of her impending doom. He didn't need to speak. His grim expression said it all. Clara May straightened her shoulders, a spark of defiance flickering in her weary eyes. "Is there nothing else, Sheriff?" she asked, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Brody sighed, adjusting his wide-brimmed hat. "The county's been patient, Clara May. Your father. He had a lot of ambition, not much foresight." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the desolate property. "There's an option. Not one I like to suggest, but the poorhouse. They'll give you a roof food. It's not much, but it's something." The words struck Clara May like a physical blow. The poorhouse, a cage, a place where dignity withered and faded. Her stomach churned, a bitter taste filling her mouth. "Never," she whispered, her voice laced with a raw, desperate resolve. "I won't go." Brody simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement of her pride, or perhaps her foolishness. He turned to leave, then hesitated. "There's talk," he said, his voice lower, almost an afterthought. "A rancher out near the Cottonwood River." Widowed, 5 children. He's looking for help. The implication hung in the air. A different kind of cage, perhaps, but one that offered a chance, however slim, to avoid the absolute desolation of the poorhouse. Clara May watched him ride away, the dust from his horse's hooves settling slowly, like the dust of her own shattered dreams. The choice was stark: the poorhouse or a leap into the unknown, a desperate gamble for survival. The sun dipped below the rugged peaks, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, a beautiful backdrop to May's bleak reality. The sheriff's words, "a different kind of cage," echoed in her mind. Her father had always taught her to stand on her own 2 feet, to never take charity. This wasn't charity, not exactly, but it felt dangerously close to a surrender of her independence. A single, tattered notice, tucked beneath a loose floorboard in the cabin, offered a sliver of desperate hope. It was an advertisement months old for a housekeeper and governess wanted for large ranch, remote location. Must be hardy and self-sufficient. Apply by post. Her hand trembled as she retrieved it, the paper brittle with age. The address was vague, somewhere deep in the desolate heart of the Wyoming plains, a place rumored to be wild and unforgiving. The thought of leaving everything she knew, even a life reduced to dust and debt, was terrifying. Yet, the alternative was the poorhouse, a fate she couldn't bear to contemplate. This advertisement, "Efa," in whisper from the past, now seemed like a lifeline, however frayed. With a heavy heart, May gathered her few belongings: a worn leather satchel containing her mother's locket, a faded daguerreotype of her parents, and a small, leather-bound journal filled with her father's meticulously recorded ranching notes. These were the only treasures she possessed, fragile links to a life that was now irrevocably gone. She penned a short, earnest reply to the advertisement, her hand cramping from disuse, describing her capabilities with a slight embellishment of her domestic skills. She had, after all, managed a small household for years, even if it was just her and her father. Days stretched into a week, each sunrise bringing a fresh wave of anxiety. The county's deadline loomed like a thundercloud. Then a dusty rider appeared on the horizon, a young boy on a pony carrying a letter. May's breath hitched. The envelope was thick, the handwriting bold and masculine. Inside, a terse, almost gruff acceptance. The rancher, a Mr. Silas Blackwood, required her services immediately. He included a small sum for travel, enough for a stagecoach ticket to the nearest town, and directions to a remote crossroads where she would be met. A wave of relief washed over her, quickly followed by a cold dread. This was a new beginning, or a new kind of prison. The stagecoach journey was long and dusty, each jolt a physical reminder of May's uncertain future. She clutched the faded letter, its edges worn from repeated handling, the name Silas Blackwood now etched into her mind. He was her last hope, a stranger offering a lifeline that felt suspiciously like a noose. The landscape blurred outside the window, vast plains giving way to rugged foothills, each mile carrying her further from everything familiar. She tried to imagine him, this rancher who held her fate in his hands. Would he be kind? Cruel? The thought of arriving at a new kind of prison, a gilded cage perhaps, gnawed at her. Finally, the coach lurched to a halt at a desolate crossroads. A lone figure stood silhouetted against the setting sun, a wide-brimmed hat obscuring his face. He was tall, his posture unyielding, and a powerful horse stood patiently beside him. May felt a shiver, not entirely from the evening chill. This had to be him. She descended from the coach, her worn satchel feeling suddenly heavy. The man stepped forward, his boots crunching on the gravel. "May?" His voice was deep, gravelly, and held an unexpected undercurrent of weariness. She nodded, her throat tight. He simply gestured to the horse. "Mount up." The ranch is a few hours' ride. The silence that followed was thick, punctuated only by the rhythmic thud of hooves on the trail. May stole glances at the man beside her, Silas Blackwood. He rode with a quiet authority, his gaze fixed on the horizon. His profile was strong, his jaw set, and a faint scar traced a line near his left eye. He hadn't offered a hand up, hadn't spoken another word since their terse exchange at the crossroads. This was not the chivalrous rescuer of dime novels. This was a man burdened, perhaps, by his own struggles, and May was just another burden he had acquired. As they rode deeper into the darkening landscape, a sudden, piercing cry echoed from the trees. Silas reined in his horse instantly, his hand going to a rifle in his saddle scabbard. May's heart leaped into her throat. He dismounted quickly, his movements fluid and purposeful, and vanished into the shadows. May waited, her horse restive, every nerve on edge. The silence stretched, broken only by the distant hoot of an owl. Then a twig snapped close by, and a figure emerged from the tree line, not Silas, but a young boy, no older than 10, tears streaming down his face. He stumbled towards May, his small hand clutching a broken bird's wing. "My pigeon," he sobbed, pointing back into the woods. "He's gone." Just then Silas reappeared, his face grim. "A mountain lion," he stated, his voice devoid of emotion. May looked from the boy's tear-streaked face to Silas's hardened one, a knot forming in her stomach. This wasn't just about her. This was a household, a family, and she was about to step into their sorrow. May watched the small boy, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The raw grief on his face mirrored the emptiness she felt inside. Silas, usually so stoic, knelt beside his son, a hand resting gently on the boy's back. He didn't offer platitudes, just a quiet, steady presence. May realized then that this ranch wasn't just a place of hardship. It was a sanctuary for a family grappling with their own profound losses. Her own struggles, while immense, suddenly felt less isolated. The mountain lion, Silas explained, had been a persistent menace, preying on their livestock for weeks. The lost pigeon, a beloved pet, was simply the latest casualty. May saw the weariness etched around Silas's eyes, the lines of worry deepening on his brow. He wasn't just a rancher. He was a protector, a father trying to hold his world together against an unrelenting wilderness. A sudden thought struck May. What if she could help? Her father, for all his flaws, had taught her to track, to read the signs of the land. It was a skill she hadn't considered useful until now. Later that evening, after the children were asleep, May found Silas by the flickering lamplight, poring over ledgers. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and wood smoke. "Silas," she began, her voice hesitant, "about the mountain lion. I might be able to help." He looked up, his expression unreadable. "My father, he taught me to track. We hunted occasionally for food." Silas studied her, a flicker of something unreadable in his gaze before he slowly nodded. "We'll go at first light," he stated, his voice low. The pre-dawn chill bit at May's exposed skin as they rode out, the world still cloaked in shadows. The air thrummed with a different kind of tension now, a shared purpose. They rode for hours, May scanning the ground, her senses sharpened. The first sign was subtle, a broken twig, a disturbed patch of earth. Then, a distinct paw print, larger than any domestic animal. She pointed, and Silas dismounted, examining it closely. The prints led them deeper into the rugged foothills, away from the familiar paths of the ranch. Suddenly, a guttural snarl ripped through the quiet. May froze, her heart leaping into her throat. From behind a cluster of pines, a large, tawny shape emerged, eyes glinting with predatory intelligence. It was the mountain lion, magnificent and terrifying. It crouched low, muscles tensed, ready to spring. May instinctively reached for the rifle Silas carried, her hand closing over the cold metal. This wasn't just about a lost pigeon or a few cattle anymore. This was about survival. May's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat echoing the primal tension in the air. The mountain lion, a magnificent beast of muscle and instinct, coiled tighter, its golden eyes fixed on Silas's unconscious form. A guttural growl rumbled in its chest, a sound that vibrated through the very ground beneath May's worn boots. She knew, with chilling certainty, that this wasn't just about protecting the flock anymore. It was about protecting the man who had unexpectedly become her anchor in this desolate land. Her fingers tightened around the cool, smooth stock of the rifle. It was heavy, unfamiliar, but a surge of fierce determination coursed through her veins. This wasn't the life she'd imagined, trapped in a cage of poverty, but a new fight had emerged, one she wouldn't back down from. She raised the rifle, the front sight wavering slightly as her breath hitched. The lion sprang, a blur of tawny fur and raw power. A shot cracked through the stillness of the high desert. The sound ripped through the air, sharp and sudden. The mountain lion, mid-leap, veered sharply, landing with an ungraceful thud a few feet from Silas. It let out a pained snarl, one of its powerful front paws clutching its shoulder, a dark stain blossoming on its fur. It was wounded, but not defeated. It eyed May with a new, furious intensity, a dangerous glint in its eyes. Before it could regroup, a second shot rang out, this one from behind May. She spun, rifle still raised, to see a figure emerging from the tree line, a shotgun cradled in his arms. It was Sheriff Brody, his face grim, but his eyes held a flicker of surprise and grudging respect as they landed on May and her smoking rifle. The lion, startled by the new threat, hesitated, then turned and limped away, disappearing into the dense pines as quickly as it had appeared. Brody lowered his shotgun, his gaze sweeping from the retreating cat to May, then to Silas. "Well, I'll be," he muttered, a rare hint of astonishment in his voice. He hadn't expected to find May standing her ground, much less with a rifle in her hands. He had come to deliver the final notice, to ensure the property was vacay. Dead. Instead, he found a scene of unexpected valor. The world, it seemed, was full of surprises. Sheriff Brody's jaw worked, a muscle twitching beneath his weathered skin. He looked at the rifle, then at May's resolute face, a flicker of something akin to respect in his eyes. "Well, May," he finally said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it, "it seems you've got more fight in you than I gave you credit for." He glanced at Silas, who stood silently beside her, his presence a quiet, unwavering support. "This changes things." He pulled a folded document from his coat. Not the eviction notice she expected, but a different paper, sealed with the county crest. "The county commission," he began, a slight hesitation in his voice. "They've been reviewing old land deeds. Turns out, your father's original claim, the one he bought from the railroad company, it had a clause, a very old, very obscure clause about mineral rights. Gold, May. There's a vein of gold running right through this land." May's breath caught in her throat. Gold? All this time, she had been scraping by, fighting for survival, while a fortune lay hidden beneath her feet. It felt like a cruel joke, a twist of fate too unbelievable to comprehend. She looked at Silas, her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and a nascent, fragile hope. The sheriff continued, "The clause states that if a mineral discovery is made, the original landowner, or their direct heir, has the first right to develop it. The county can't just seize the land for back taxes if there's an active claim being pursued. They're offering you a chance, May, a grace period. 6 months to prove you can work this claim to show you're serious." A wave of relief, so profound it almost buckled her knees, washed over May. The poorhouse, the cage, the endless struggle, it all seemed to recede, replaced by a sliver of possibility. But then, the enormity of the task settled in. She knew nothing about mining, nothing about gold. This was a new kind of mountain, perhaps even steeper than the last. Silas stepped forward, his hand gently touching her arm. "We'll figure it out, May," he said, his voice a steady anchor in the swirling current of her emotions. "My father, he did some prospecting in his younger days. I remember a few things. We'll learn the rest." Brody watched them, a small, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. "I'll leave you to it then," he said, turning to go. "Just remember, May, 6 months. And the county will be watching." As his horse trotted away, the silence of the high desert returned. But it was a different kind of silence now. It was no longer empty, but filled with the quiet hum of possibility, the promise of a future May had never dared to dream of. She looked at Silas, at his kind, steady gaze, and knew that together, they might just turn this dusty, forgotten patch of land into something truly golden. The world, indeed, was full of surprises, and some of them were beautiful. The judge's gavel bell struck, a sound that echoed not just in the small courtroom, but in the very heart of the town. May, her head held high, watched as the foreman read the verdict. Not guilty. A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers, quickly followed by a murmur of approval from those who had witnessed her unwavering spirit. The prosecution's case, built on flimsy accusations and town gossip, had crumbled under the weight of truth and the quiet, steadfast testimony of the rancher. Outside, the air felt different, lighter, as if the oppressive weight of judgment had finally lifted. The rancher stood by his wagon, his 5 children gathered around him, their faces reflecting the hope he had rekindled in their lives. He offered May a hand up, a simple gesture that spoke volumes of trust and a future unburdened by the past. The stagecoach, once a symbol of her confinement, now represented a journey toward a life she had only dreamed of. She looked back at the town, no longer a place of despair, but a stepping stone in her remarkable journey. Her gaze met the rancher's, a silent understanding passing between them. The cage, a brutal reminder of society's harsh judgment, had ironically led her to freedom, to a man whose kindness knew no bounds, and to a family who saw beyond her circumstances. She had faced down the very system that sought to break her, emerging not just unscathed, but stronger, her spirit forged in the fires of injustice. The journey had been long, fraught with despair and false promises, but in the end, it was the unwavering belief of one man that had truly broken her chains, allowing her to finally embrace a life of dignity and love. As the wagon pulled away, dust rising in its wake, a new chapter began, written not in sorrow, but in the enduring power of hope.